Hello and welcome to another episode of the Live Thrivingly podcast. Wherever you are, I invite you to sit back and enjoy as we bring to light inspiring stories and invaluable lessons from human beings across the globe. Let's explore together the shared threads of philosophy, theory, and the mysteries of the unknown to reveal underlying forces that contribute to a flourishing lifestyle. Join me on a quest to discover pathways to thriving as we explore and share wisdom that benefits us all. And if you've been enjoying this podcast, I would greatly appreciate it if you could leave a rating or review on your streaming platform.
What's going on, my friends? Jackson Hall with the Live Thrivingly podcast here with my friend Zachary Robison. How you doing today, Zach?
Man, I'm doing really well.
Thanks for making the time to be here, and I'm really excited to chat with you tonight and explore all the different aspects of what you do and learn a little bit more about your story. So to kind of start us off, I would love to know, maybe kind of high level, what do you do with your time kind of day to day?
Well, I feel really fortunate at this point where a lot of what I get to do is have really deep, meaningful conversations with people throughout the day. And then the rest of the time I spend it pretty much doing what makes me happy, whether that's hanging out that day and doing nothing, or even right now I'm enjoying doing manual labor, working on a horse farm, because that's what's actually really alive for me right now.
That's awesome. And so, Zach, I'm sure there's so much that has kind of all had to happen to lead you to this part of life you're in and what you're doing and what you're able to do. Could you shed more light on some of your story and what has shaped you into the man you are today?
So I would say that a lot of it came from doing my best not to be what I was raised to be. I grew up in a place where there was a lot of violence and drug use and poverty. And I think it's really easy to be raised to not be the best person in those types of environments. And then I really, really made it an intention to try to be better than the people around me. I think one of the core lessons that I got from all that, like what kind of motivates me, is to like knowing what pain is. Like, I think there's a couple of different ways people can feel it. People feel pain and want others to hurt. And then there's people that are hurt that don't want anyone else to experience it. I'm not saying that everyone's on that, but I find that a lot of people can fall on those. And so I'm more on I know what pain is, and I prefer not to be one of the people who makes other people hurt. And so that's probably one of the bigger things that set me on the journey. Um, and then like the other thing that I feel is relevant is that I spend a lot of time looking at different religions and different, government systems and a lot of different programs. Like, what is it that's wrong with the world and how do we make it better? I kept finding all these great systems that kept failing. And it turned into like what makes all of them fail. And a lot of the time it was people are missing something very foundational, in my opinion, which is the ability to have like emotional intelligence, or the ability to really manage what's going on in our inner world. So all these systems essentially fail because people have feelings and really make decisions off of those instead of addressing how they feel. And so I've spent a lot of my adult life at this point trying to learn how to manage my own feelings and supporting other people having more practical, applicable skills to manage, essentially the weight of being alive.
hmm Yeah, little bit you shared there is definitely resonant with some of the components of my journey as well. And I'm sure many listeners out there and people that you work with in life coaching is kind of some of those more fundamental questions and sometimes those existential questions of really, um, what are all these systems and religions and things that we should or shouldn't follow, and what's right versus what's wrong, and kind of eventually diving in and discovering for yourself kind of what the right path looks like for you. I'm sure what encourage your anyone you're around to think critically and to tap in and to follow their heart and listen. So I'd love to know a little bit more about your path as a life coach and how you work with people through life coaching.
So I kind of look at my life coaching as like where somebody is just like foundationally, like show up to the call and we spend some time looking at like something I think is missing in a lot of people's lives is just a base understanding of like how emotions even work and how people can look at and process feelings. And if that's not there, I think there should be just a basic educational component to coaching or even therapy. Like, how do we help people even understand what we're talking about and looking at? And then from there, we move into one of two things after that, because I kind of break it up into three sections. There's the education portion. Then there's like diving into like what's going on. Sometimes that feels more like triage. Like you feel like you're already like underwater and we're just trying to get you up for a breath of air. But then the next section is I really like to do skill building, like really helping people learn what are some practical, applicable ways to approach any given moment so that you have a clearer outcome of what you're going for and the steps that will support you actually getting there. So sometimes it's just really simple. I mean, when I say simple, like the steps are simple, but actually practicing them, that's where the work takes place. And so I find that's where a lot of my coaching these days is kind of operating from. It's either depending on like how you're framing and seeing things. And how do I help you support that by supplementing with education and perspective? And here's how some of these things work, either whether relational neuroscience or how some of the nervous system regulates. And then how do we support people feeling seen and heard and or you feeling seen and heard in ways that create some of that regulation? And then we jump into the other aspects of like the way that you have been processing how you feel and how you look at the world will impact this moment and every moment following. And the more that we learn how to address this moment, it supports everyone after that. So like if you really struggle with being sad or angry right now, it'll continue to be that way, maybe even compounding further throughout your life. So the moment you learn how to sit with that now, it impacts our ability to have more what they call like a window of tolerance. And I don't want the window of tolerance to be like we sit in it and we just struggle with it. A window of tolerance means that you're able to not move into reactivity, but moving into being proactive. Like I have the ability to stay calm and still get out of the situation. And then the third section is just spending time with someone and noticing like, all right, you're good at this part, you're good at that part. I think if we work on this particular skill, you know, in this moment, when you would normally respond with a solution, what would it look like if you asked them what they needed from you after they shared? Because I know me, man, I want to hammer every nail that's around me. And some people don't want a solution. They want a hug. Some people just want you to agree that sucked. Like that feels
Yeah.
safe to be angry in your presence. I can't tell you how often people just wish that they could be angry and nobody be upset with them. Like one of my favorite things to teach people, it's not the anger that people are scared of, it's the actions we take in that anger. And then letting people learn how to discern or see that there's such a difference between feeling anger and acting from it. And that you feeling anger is actually an important part of life because we all feel it. It's one of the emotions that we're supposed to have. And so that's what I
Hmm.
mean by like learning how to be with certain aspects like, oh, you're doing everything but feeling the anger. Can we sit with the anger for 5 minutes, and not make it wrong? So that kind of stuff. So it's a whole spectrum of just kind of meeting somebody where they are, paying attention and being like, hey, can we go tinker with this little thing over here and see what happens? Knowing that the more we essentially shine light on every part of a person with care, attunement, and like the intent to nourish, I've never seen any part of anybody not flourish from that type of effort.
Wow. Yeah, thanks for going into your kind of your three sections there that you take to approaching life coaching. And it's something that I haven't particularly informed practiced, maybe some of my things on my own and some life coaching master classes, etc. I haven't really got to work with a life coach one-on-one. I'm curious, to have some more conversations outside of this with you and see what that kind of feels like and looks like. I've worked with a lot of different coaches and mentors, therapists in different lines of work, and I think they each have their place. I think maybe one of the questions for me is just kind of how do you see life coaching differ from therapy?
Well, I think there's a lot of pros and cons between the two of them. I really, really love how much rigor and structure is demanded in therapy, how it's a doctorate and, there's an oversight of a committee and, there's rules and things of that nature that I think are really helpful and healthy. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where that can make it to where the connection that I think is important between people for a therapeutic relationship actually to happen can be diminished because of all of the structure at the same time. And on the inverse of being a life coach, I think sometimes there's not enough rigor or structure, and you have somebody want to just tell you they're a cacao priestess and come sit with me, and we're going to save your life by the power of now and wishful thinking. And I think that stuff's important. I think people need to go through those processes. Reason being is that I think we all need to believe that we're powerful. That's all that
Mhm.
means to me when somebody's doing that kind of stuff. Like they just need to have a story big enough for them to feel like they can break through what they normally feel stuck in. But if you
Mhm.
dial that back into how do I have practical, applicable, objective, and accountability as like main focuses, I think that me being able to be myself, like I am Zach in my coaching calls versus I am a therapist. And like
Mhm.
there's a level of like I'm inviting people to be human with me as I aim to be myself. I think that like when I'm permissioning self, hopefully it helps you permission being more of yourself. And then we just kind of deal with what comes up, you know? Like there's things called like vulnerability hangovers where all of a sudden you felt safe to share for the first time and then you feel terrible afterwards. And I think that's normal. And like because I've been doing this being myself for so long, I'm good at being like, hey, just so you know, this might happen now that we're in
Mhm.
this moment. But I'm tangenting. Back to your question, the difference between therapy and coaching. I think therapy can be too dry, cold, indifferent, or separated. And that's from a place of, I think some people actually need that level of structure and for
Mhm.
things to be that careful because you have people with really severe trauma and people with really uh, painful psychosis and or like impairment. And I
Mhm.
think some of those structures are really helpful. And then you have day to day normal people that could use someone being like, dude, you're fucking up and have that be in the
Mhm.
therapeutic practice of somebody actually caring about you and with you. And so there's a relation, like essentially, I feel like a really good friend who's put my life into figuring out how to manage very particular parts of life, and that the relationship is for you to rely on me in those particular ways. That's even like where I got a lot of why I do this from. I was doing this too much everywhere, and I needed to titrate it back into how do I make this a healthy balance. But once again, I think that if the coaches who are out there taking the time to actually do rigorous growth and exercise and integration and not coaching people to do things that are ungrounded, unsafe, or damaging to their life, they're great. Just as much as I've heard of people talking about therapy has never really helped because they just keep asking them, how do you feel about that? Like the jokes, like
Mhm.
how do you help somebody be an inquiry if they don't know how? Sometimes you have to develop the skill of inquiry.
Uh-huh.
So these are the types of things that I think are, and don't get me wrong, some therapists have that as a part of their regimen. But then on the other spectrum, sometimes there's a bit too much distance.
Absolutely. Well explained, and I appreciate that kind of breaking that down for us. And I personally feel like another thing I feel like I'd add to that is just being able to meet people that you might actually, end up paying or getting into an energy exchange to do this kind of work is so important. And I try to kind of pass that along to others based off what I've learned on my own journey is like, you might really be a match with someone. It might really work. And I think I've learned like sometimes I rushed into matches because I was like, I need this to work right now. And it might have not been the right person. And I love when the coach or the mentor is like, hey, like I might not be the right fit, but I know people that might be the right fit. So appreciate people in that line of work that are kind of doing that, and hope to continue to see that modeled. But overall, if people are interested in getting into a relationship with a therapist or a coach in many different fields, like just feel it out. And definitely sometimes, like I've heard, the the wrong therapist is like the greatest teacher, right? Sometimes getting into these bad relationships are like, I had a guy on here recently who's like a multi-generation shaman from Mexico, and he was like, sometimes I'm the bad shaman, sometimes I'm the good one. He's like, he wasn't trying to lead with like he's bad all the time, but he was like, sometimes like the way that people work with me, it's they take that as like, oh my gosh, I need to go a different direction. So that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that comes in direct correlation with when I teach facilitators. I'm super aware I'm not everyone's cup of tea when it comes to facilitating anything, which is why when I'm training someone, the goal is it for you to learn these skills, but implement them through the lens of you, because you're going to be somebody's cup of tea. And the things that you want and like, you're going to start catching all the things that I would never even pick up because that's more important to you. And so I think that's really important as well, is that finding somebody that actually, like when I do I have a vibe check. I literally set up a 30-minute call before, like, I could be perfect for you, but do we vibe? Does this actually
Yeah.
feel like we would hang out and this would go well? And I also let them like, hey man, my plan is to fire you someday, that you're healthy enough that we don't need to see each other. And then we're just humans and homies afterwards, because the goal is for you to be able to feel like you can really hold your life, but that comes with a vibe check. Like, hey, does this feel like what we want to do? Yeah. Groovy. Let's move on. We're like, no, I've actually turned people to other, like, I don't know if I'm the fit, like, I think this might be what you're looking for more over here, like you're saying, you know?
Yeah, thanks for that note. And I know you kind of shared briefly while we were hopping on this recording, and when I first met you, that you really don't have like a website or anything, and you're not consistently like funneling in like clients to try to work with. You're much more organic and grassroots through word of mouth, which I think is honorable, and I think that's a unique way to be, especially in your line of work, is uh, being able to kind of have those organic clients kind of reveal themselves. I think for those people that very much rely on structure and having like ways to bring in people, they'd probably be like, oh my gosh, that's the scariest thing, to not know where business might be coming from. But how did how did you kind of arrive at that style of I guess marketing per se?
You mind if I think for a second?
Yeah, you got it.
I think a lot of it comes down to two parts. One, I was so focused on like the clients that I had in front of me, that like the building more and all of that stuff, I wasn't sure like that was even the direction I wanted to fully take it. And then the other side of it was that like it started organically happening before I even started investing in like, all right, I need to build a website and I need to essentially have my online business card and all this other stuff. It turned into a barometer for me of people are really feeling cared, seen for, and supported, that they're telling other people like, hey, I know a guy who might be able to actually help you. And to me, that felt like I was actually supporting people, that they wanted to make sure the people around them they mattered were getting supported. So that's kind of how it grew, was that I turned it into am I just showing up for work, or am I really dropped in with the intention of helping this person? And when I say helping, I've always been trying to gauge where the line is between supporting someone, supporting themselves, and not trying to pick up their problems and making them my own. So I'm always trying to keep an eye on that particular facet of supporting other people. And that's a lot of where it came from, was just me not wanting this to be about money for me, but for it to stay in the realm of like, am I really helping people, and are they letting other people know that I know a guy? And that's felt so just clean and easy for me, because I know I could go out there and be like, all right, make the website and advertise, and I can fill my week up and do 40 hours plus a week of just nonstop coaching. And why does that feel off to me? I think the big thing that has it feel off to me is that I don't want to feel so inundated with everyone else's problems that my life feels overwhelming and burdensome just trying to support everyone else. And then the other part of it is that I want to make sure I'm navigating the difference between like having a life that feels fulfilling and that I'm aligned with, and then not pursuing some kind of like external like comfort or like financial point, or like there's a way that
Hmm.
I try to make sure that I'm not getting caught up in a hungry ghost.
Hmm.
You know what a hungry ghost is?
No. How do
So
you
yeah, a hungry
explain
ghost
that?
is this thing in like I think it's Buddhism, but essentially it's that like having a desire that no matter how much you feed it, it's never satiated.
Hmm.
Like people who like want to chronically be like giving kudos or accolades or attention, and nothing's enough. Or even like if
Hmm.
you're having a fight with a partner, like I never feel seen or safe enough. I'm like, if you're not careful, you're feeding that hungry ghost, the thing that you think is your solution, but it's just making the fear, the anxiety, and the uncertainty diminish versus go away. And so, like, what's the deeper thing that's here that I can put my attention on? So, if I find myself wanting to go coach and make money because I'm like, oh God, what am I going to do about my life? And I need to make sure I have money. I'm like, it's not the motivation I want for my job. If I need to do that, I'd rather just go get a 9 to 5 somewhere. And that's not the energy I want to take into supporting people. Now, I know that that's like my own principle, and I don't want anybody else to try to take that up, because I'm also comfortable with very little at times. It's part of my background. Like I grew up
Hmm.
homeless at different points, and having just food and water was enough. Like discomfort had become a part that I'm comfortable with. And from that discomfort, I've used that to help me stay in my principles, because to stay principled often comes with discomfort. And so for me, how I've gotten here, so it's just kind of like this thing where I want to actually make sure I'm not helping people and not just making money.
Yeah.
Long winded, but that's, I think, essentially.
No, it's great. Made some great points. And I'd also add kind of the way I've heard some other people describe it is one of my friends shared that her mentor that she apprenticed in, serving medicine, particularly like, entheogenic medicine, was like, never serve medicine full time. And she was like, if you serve medicine full time, at some point, you're going to sacrifice your values and your authenticity as a medicine carrier to pay bills, etc. And I know that can be, it's not easy to, and I take that as an analogy for more than just carrying medicine, and this, but being able to stay true to yourself and your values and still make an impact from a purposeful place, and a place that you feel that you're doing it from your center and in alignment, and not other places. But I know that's an individual journey for each person. So thanks for illuminating a little bit about yours.
Yeah, man, thanks.
So you mentioned, Zach, that you do some work with authentic relating. I've heard the term before, I've heard a little bit about it, but I'd really love to know more about what authentic relating is.
Well, that's a pretty big umbrella. What I would say authentic relating is somebody took a bunch of different therapeutic practices and started doing it in groups, with it not being intended to be therapeutic, but just to be experiential. And then taking that and just sitting with one another and discussing, like, what was that like to do that with one another? And in turn, it created a really like a there, at least here in Texas, there was a bunch of different groups in Dallas and Austin and Houston. There was a big group of people doing this stuff, and then also in Boulder, Colorado, and then there was a significant amount of people in California, and they were doing this all around the same time. Not to say it's not still going on now; it still is. Um, but about 14 years ago, when I got into it, we were essentially doing a bunch of just these experiential exercises together. And instead of being vague, I can be very specific. Doing things like a noting practice or noticing practice, where you're taking the time to sit with one another and just notice what's going on with your body for a minute. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, that was the first time I really just paid attention to my body that long without doing something about it. And then after that, that minute's up. You do like 2 minutes of like one word naming what your emotion is in that moment, back and forth with a partner. So now all of a sudden you're getting this skill of just practicing noticing and clearly identifying and doing our best to name what we just came in contact within ourselves that happens every moment. And then you move into other exercises, like one of my favorite is curiosity practice, where you sit with partners and you take turns really dropping into, instead of actually asking interesting questions, you're asking interested. Like, what am I actually interested in you? And slowing down, just like how a minute ago was like, hey, can I have a second to think? Like, instead of trying to fill the time of being proper and kind and asking questions right out the gate, really slowing down and learning how to see, like, what would actually feel alive for me to ask about you? So developing the skill of like, what am I actually curious about right now? And all of a sudden you're in this exercise where you and this other person are having a conversation about like, hey, if you were going to be a cartoon character, which one would you think it is? Which can land as an interesting question, but if you genuinely want to know that answer, and all of a sudden you're hearing somebody talk about how I feel like I'm Robin Hood from the Disney cartoons, and like, okay, God, why? What's that? And so now you're in this like enlivened conversation where you're in interaction with one another in this way that is off the beaten path of asking about your typical things, like, what do you do for work? How was your day? You know, what did you study in school? Like, it's one of those things where it's like, hey, there's so much more content inside of every person, and taking the time to cultivate the skill for that aliveness. And then what I love about that skill, it transcends often our assumptions about people. And what's even better about that is that if I can learn to take that same curiosity that I've cultivated and put it in every moment, it takes the part of me that's constantly making assumptions and judgments and being closed off or guarded or coveting something. If I slow down and I'm curious, it moves myself into such a state of being with what's happening and way less reactive to it. Because now I'm like, well, what was that? What happened there? What's going on? Why were you like that? You're normally so kind. What happened? Versus like, whoa, you're being a dick. Like, it really helped with like these little things. And so like this is what authentic relating was doing for me, which was helping me develop these little skills that I had no idea that I was cultivating in a space where people are just practicing all of these things together.
Wonderful. And by practicing these skills in this container through authentic relating, and then you're able to take that out into everyday life. I'm going to give a shot at kind of what I feel like it can do for us, and then you can kind of add in the points of what you feel like the benefits are of that. But when I just hear authentic relating, I'm like, relating authentically, right? So being able to share our authentic selves, and I think learn to see the authentic selves in others and cultivate a much deeper, more connected relationship. And I had a guy share with me on the Live Thrivingly project that he believes, to live thrivingly is to live in relationship with everything, right? And to understand that your relationships are pretty much fundamental for how you experience life and the quality of that. So I think authentic relating and the skills and the practices involved in that is a beautiful thing and is definitely a huge aspect of kind of what I'm trying to illuminate with the Live Thrivingly project.
Yeah. I notice I feel comforted hearing that. Like, oh yeah, that sounds nice. Like to really be present and connect to my life from me. And that's what you're aiming to do. Like, yeah, get behind that. I think the only thing I would add to what you're sharing that I think is really important is that I think there's something to like a cautionary tale around the word authentic. What I have found over years of being an authentic, relating practices and supporting people trying to be authentic is that the version of you that is authentic will be changing moment to moment. And the skills are designed to support the version of you that's here right now, knowing that you'll really normally identify strongly with whatever's here in a way that you might not identify with tomorrow. And now what we're doing is we're holding space for there has been things that have held for a long time in my life, which I've loved pizza for as long as I can remember.
Mhm.
And there's other things that have changed drastically from time to time that used to be something so core to my identity. I imagine you can think about friends or past relationships or jobs or hobbies that felt that way that don't anymore. And then what I'm really wanting to highlight is that if you get caught up in this is the authentic me, just be present that that's the version of you that might be here right now. And that there's going to be change. And the more that you are seen, validated, accepted, and nourished in that who you are right now, there's almost a guarantee that that moment, a version of you is going to be gone because you just probably grew. And now there's someone else here.
Mhm.
Just the same if you don't feel like that version of you is accepted. Now there's a protective nature or a feeling sad or defeated. Like there's just so many things that are happening to us that shift. And so that authentic self isn't trying to create some kind of defining structure of who we are, but in this moment, that's how we feel and what we see, what we understand, and what feels real to us. Knowing that as life moves on, we're going to continue to learn new things and feel new things and see new things in a way that we couldn't be who we were then. And so authentic you, if really trying to be you, will be something that changes.
A fabulous expansion on the word authentic, and I really, in referring to ourselves as our authentic selves, that I haven't heard before, and definitely want to sit with that myself and kind of do some more journaling into that and what I take away from kind of what you said and what I'm feeling with that. That's really good.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because I find that like a lot of pain in life comes from friction. And what I mean by friction is that the more that we hold on to what we think is true or what we want to be true or what we desire, the more that we're in dissonance or reluctance or just flat out denial of what is happening. That's where the friction is. I'm not saying that we should accept what's happening right now as if we roll over and let it happen. But the more we
Mhm.
can accept what's happening in this moment, what is happening in our life, whether it's the death of a loved one or a bad day at work or getting everything you wanted and it feeling hollow. It's really dropping in this moment and accepting that's where we are in this moment. And then how do we authentically and with as much ability as possible move forward in a way that either holds space for our sadness, lets us manage our upset so that we can continue having the rest of our life feel better, or address that we've done everything that we thought that we were supposed to, but in a way that didn't give us the satisfaction we were promised. And so like really making room for that life is normally going to be more complex or different than what we imagined. And that the way we can adapt to that, the more we're adaptable to what is, really empowers us to make more of the steps to give us what we're craving, wanting, needing, or desiring.
That's beautifully said. I wish I could recap it. I was just so enveloped in what you were sharing.
I'm just on a tear. I'm having fun.
Hey, really, this has been so much fun already. And it's funny, the last time me and Zach were together, we were like a 2-day bushcraft survival 101 course out in Bastrop, Texas. If you've never heard of the Earth Native Wilderness School, definitely go check them out. Really cool stuff they're doing for children and adult, and just kind of rewilding, primal skill teaching and stuff. And we just had a ball out there, right, Zach?
Oh yeah, I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with you and with the class in general. The teacher was really wonderful, and I didn't realize I wanted to be that competent with a knife.
I didn't even know there was that much to know about a knife in particular. And he said he had to cut the class short on that,
Yeah,
knife anatomy and blade anatomy and what type of blade to use for this and that. And so that's kind of where I met Zach. When was that? A couple months ago.
yeah.
Uh, maybe beginning of February, end of January. But I know that you're a man of, many hobbies, and you've probably explored many different paths and tried a lot of things. I know you shared some of those with me, but how do you kind of approach jumping into new skills and stuff, whether, it's kind of these interpersonal or emotional intelligence skills you talk about, or just kind of these external skills. Like, I think you said, like, you twirl fire, and here we are learning how to do bushcraft and learning different survival techniques. Like, what kind of draws you into that, and what do you feel like you're able to take away from those?
That's a fun question. You mind if I think about my answer first? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I know what feels alive for me to answer, like the thing that's like most here is that I used to really have an ego around doing well when I was younger. Doing poorly like hurt my feelings. It almost validated my sense of inadequacy or insecurity or, the not feeling like I'm enough, which in reflection is really nice to notice that it's shifted much deeper into a form of like, well, yeah, of course I'm learning. That's why I'm here. I don't know and I don't need to know. And that all practice comes with like not doing it perfectly. And I think about that as I remember me sitting next to you when we were whittling our sticks, and you were like trying to make every little thing perfect, and mine didn't look as good, but I was really just happy, like there trying it out. I was like, I get what I'm doing now. I'm just dialing in on the nuance, and I think that's what it is taking the time to get what I'm doing, so that I can dial in on the nuance. What's the big picture, and how do I titrate that down into smaller and smaller bits? You know, I can do the same thing that's the beginner thing and it's something and kind of move that towards mastery without always having to go to like, what's the next big thing? So I think what's here for me is how I approach life at this point is I'm not looking for it to, actually, if anything, I'm really open to it being messy,
Hmm.
really open to it having room for well, that didn't go the way I wanted. There's a lot of, it feels like grace and humility in a way that has room for play and mistakes. Is kind
Uh-huh.
of how I try to approach things, and I try enough things that, hold on, there's something here. There it is. I think the things that really matter to me, I've done a lot of work to already feel like I'm good at them, so that all the things on top of that feel good, to not have to be perfect. I have a base and a foundation in myself where I trust myself to do what I can, and that I don't have to be perfect because I believe that I can make myself get through something and it come out okay on the other side. So a lot of the pressure is diminished because I've learned to trust myself. Even if I'm not good at that skill, I'm somebody that I feel safe being. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's true. That feels nice to say.
Amazing. Yeah, it's funny. Zach was sitting right there next to me, and he did tell me that. And I recently, after that trip, I actually met up with a wonderful friend of mine from Norway who was house sitting in Austin, and we went on a long walk through cedar trees, and I brought my little stick. She ended up writing a song about the smell of cedar trees and what they mean to her in her time in Texas. It's a beautiful song. I hope she puts it in the album she's working on. But I ended up giving her that stick, and it was a really tough thing to let go of. But I was like, I'll just work on another one. But I really felt like it was a great gift to give, and we did spend a lot of time with those sticks, and I felt I did a pretty good job with it. Definitely room for improvement. But I did a second stick recently. This is what I'm getting to, and I noticed like the stick was a little smaller, and I just wasn't able to kind of get it to where I had gotten the first stick. But I noticed myself like over whittling, like it was good. And then like I was like, oh, just that one more little shave. And then all of a sudden I over whittled it, and now it's lost integrity. And the way I see that analogous to how I approach things in life, I think some of my projects at work at times are good, but then I kind of over whittle them and it almost loses its full integrity because I try to I try to make it perfect. So I'm definitely working through my perfectionism and OCD. I have a lifetime to go, but I'm at least kind of becoming aware of it. And it's funny how the practice of whittling a stick, in this day and age, you don't really have any reason to whittle a stick. Back in the day, we had much more reasons to, but that's kind of just to kind of share one of my own experiences of what like this skill of bushcraft and just whittling a stick with a knife is kind of showing me those nuances and those subtleties I can pick up on and relate to other parts of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you just did a good job of describing the vulnerability of caring. And what I mean by that is that, like, to care about the outcome and wanting it to be done well, and that if it's not, can feel really vulnerable or uncomfortable, and to the point where, it's like the sore on the top of your mouth, keep tonguing it, instead of just leaving it alone. It's hard to just leave it be because that little nagging of the care of, well, what if I like, it matters. And so now it's hard for me to just leave it alone.
What's really interesting is after that share that I just made, like something just grounded me in my body, and I feel so much more present with you right here in this moment. And I think that just speaks to being able to, you know, talk about these things and share them from a place without judgment, and that we're just humans and we're working through this messy thing we call life.
Totally. Yeah. I feel happy hearing that, man.
And I think it's funny when you think about kids, right? Like kids are so happy of their creations, and you might be, man, that is really out there. But like as kids, they're so, and I think you might have more to share about this, just maybe societal pressures and boxes, and maybe who parents you, who mentors you, and you might learn that, okay, like I especially with schooling and stuff, like I need to do this better, I need to do this better. And so we lose touch of more of just that messiness of creation and just letting it be what it'll be. Like I almost want to challenge myself to just make something that's like without that perfect in mind. Just, and that's art probably, I think that is art at its true form.
I don't know if I want to go into far, like saying too much on all of that, because that gets into like a lot of subjective and a lot of
Yeah.
nuance, but what I will say is that I think there is something about letting things be messy and or not having to be perfect, to bring a lot of joy. For instance, last night, my partner has kids and they've been helping with the building the fence that we've been working on here. Um, and out of gratitude, what I did was I took a piece of old wire and some 2x4s, and I had them sit down with me with some drills and some hammers, and we just built this thing, and I didn't tell them what it was for. We built this thing. It ended up being a metal rack target where we had the little magnet plates, and they were just hanging, and then I brought out the gift, which was these Nerf guns. I was like, "Thank you." But that thing, it looks cool, but it was messy. We didn't care. We were out there just banging away on some nails, not everything's perfectly square, but, kids jumping up and down and giving hugs and like, "This is amazing." And, that's what they were doing even when I got home from school today. there's a quality of like things don't have to be perfect. Sometimes just throwing something together messy out of care and intention does a lot. And so I will validate that, like having room to just try something. I think that's what's really here more than having an outcome or navigating how we even look at outcomes. I think because I'm skill driven or practical, I think just learning how to try things, just to go for something and to know that that's going to be as important as the outcome sometimes.
Love that. I can just see these kids running around with Nerf guns all lit up. And it's like, I think the things we build and create is more about the feelings it might bring to us in the moment or to the other people, but not like I think for myself that oftentimes I'm over trying to perfect the things I'm working on in order for the feeling to be what I'm particularly looking for out of it, rather than sometimes, my creation gets shot down by somebody. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, like what did I do wrong? Like instead of just being like, I gave it a try, I took a stab at it and it's decent, but not everybody is going to love every piece of it. Into a reminder to myself to just not be as attached to what that outcome might be or how other people might perceive that creation if I'm proud of myself for the try.
Absolutely. Yeah. What's your, do you mind if I ask you a question? I know you're asking me
Sure,
questions.
man. Sure.
Yeah. So if you were to really drop in this moment, what would feel good for you in this moment and what we're doing? It doesn't even have to be about the podcast. Like, what would really feel nourishing for you in this moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. Kind of a tough one to answer. I feel like what I'm kind of go into after we finish this podcast is just some time back home in a room, just kind of just chilling out. It's Monday. Mondays can be Mondays for all of us, right? And this has already been quite nourishing sitting here talking with you and just loosening up the expectations. It's been a while since I've recorded my last podcast, and I feel like I've always kind of run these well, but each one of them has its own form and its own kind of, and I like that. I like that organicness. I feel like that brings true authenticity into the podcast. It's like, yeah, some days it might not be a number one podcast. It might not go exactly as planned, and I kind of like that. So, and it's nice that you're kind of changing it up here and asking me a question. But to answer the question specifically, I don't know exactly.
I love the honest answer. Yeah. And what I mean by that is
But
that, like,
yeah.
go ahead. No, say something. What
Yeah,
were you saying?
it's yeah, what would be most nourishing is just, just honoring myself, in this moment and here after this afternoon, just taking my time heading back home. I find myself oftentimes with all the projects and all of the different pressures and different responsibilities on myself that I've got to go tend to all these things. I have the Live Thrivingly podcast, and I have a book, my second book that I'm working on right now, and it's in its final stages in that creation, right? And then I have my career duties at my family business and all that comes with that, and things at my house that I have to work on and organize. My truck's a little messy, that needs to be cleaned up, and just realizing like just take them one step at a time, but don't forget like sometimes, rest and just relaxation and doing something that nourishes me is what's ultimately going to get the most out of me in the long run instead of running myself dry on all these things.
Yeah. It reminds me of the thing I try to keep my finger on is I can be completely behind what I'm doing, but if I'm not careful, how I'm doing it will make things hard on me. Like I can be totally about helping people and trying to knock out this project, or like I'm so 100% behind all of these things. But am I doing it in a way that actually lets me still be me? Or, and this is an authentic question, but like, do I actually feel like what I am doing is kind of putting me in a box where the things that I actually feel alive around or thrive off of or feel nourished by, how much of those are in my life still? Because if I'm not careful, even the inverse, if I'm not careful, I can go too much into the things that feel alive. And then all of a sudden I feel ungrounded and I don't feel secure in my life because I haven't done the practical grounding of like, what am I doing and how am I going about it so that I have the ability to keep having nourishing experiences. You know, you don't want to use up your whole paycheck essentially, not knowing where the next one's coming from. Just kind of like as a metaphor, I think everybody can understand. Just making sure that I'm still looking at my future, but not so strongly that it makes me drop my present.
Spoken like a true life coach.
I love how cheesy that sounds to me.
But yeah, it's spoken like a
No,
man
no, no.
who is living his journey.
You don't have to change it. No, I like that it was cheesy. Yeah. Um, can I ask more questions to you, or do you want to ask me a question?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so the thing that caught my attention was this moment where you're like, yeah, I don't know. And then you're like, well, I can take it easy. It almost felt like you were figuring it out in real time, the answer of what would be nourishing. And the reason I want to put my attention back on that is, what was it like to have the moment before you knew what would actually be nourishing? What was that moment like for you?
Kind of scary, to be honest,
What do you mean by
A
scary?
little
Like I
scary,
I
yeah.
know
Just
what
like,
that means, but like what does it mean for you in this moment?
yeah, I like to, there's definitely an element of me that likes to be in control. It definitely loosened that up over time just through, intentional work and kind of noticing that about myself and feeling into that and knowing. Um, but yeah, this aspect of like, man, if I don't know in this moment, if I don't know on this podcast, if I can't give a succinct answer, um, because I do like the way I'm able to formulate answers and questions and things sometimes. And if I can't as quickly and kind of as tap into that and kind of know what would most nourish me in this moment or any other thing that I'm trying to kind of answer, um, there's this element of like, oh yeah, like I can tell that I need to slow down and really nourish when it's taking me more time to feel into that. And I know that maybe doesn't answer the question exactly.
It does to me. Yeah. But go ahead. You were gonna say something.
Uh, well, yeah, I was going to give an example. And I like that we're doing this. And to the audience, I think we can all get value out of what we're doing here. It's almost kind of like we're having a little life coach session with Zach. So I think this is a cool little addition to the podcast because this is real time. And so I had to film some advertisements today for our family roofing business, and I had to kind of go off of a script. And I don't read off scripts oftentimes. I'm very much more kind of off the cuff and ask me questions and kind of let me go into it. Some days, I feel like my articulation and what I'm trying to speak to hit a little better. Today, maybe just felt like a little out of step, a little out of rhythm, like my instrument, like I'm a little rusty. And I just, I wish I could have shown up better in those today. And I kind of have some notes to do it better next time. I got out there and I tried, but that was kind of sitting with me after that was like, dang, like I haven't done that in a while. And I really don't ever do scripted stuff. And I didn't exactly like how I delivered in that. So that would be another piece of just kind of like, yeah, like, and it speaks to a lot of what we're saying here.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I noticed right now I'm just kind of dropping into like feeling some care. Like what I would say is it sounds like discomfort, of doing something and it not being to my standards, especially if it's meant to be seen by others. And it's just a quality of I know for me feeling vulnerable at times being seen and
Hmm.
being in one of the moments where like appearance is actually the priority, and needing to fall into some kind of structure to look a certain way. Yeah, I could feel care and some sadness that didn't go well for you today. Because I know for me to have those kind of moments, it's like disappointed, disheartening. And then, I use the word vulnerability pretty often, but I think that's often what's going on for us is that something happened and I feel vulnerable. I don't feel as solid. I don't feel as clear. I don't feel as certain. You know, I have some anxiety. I have some like all of these other things to me can kind of just be boiled down to like I'm vulnerable right now.
Hmm.
So hearing that you had that experience, and then it even sounds like it was kind of in synergy with like you touching like, wow, I didn't even know what I wanted to feel nourished right now. There's a vulnerability. And I'm like, but I don't like that. Doesn't feel good. So yeah, I appreciate you letting me check in on you and see how you're doing and ask those questions because on my own selfish side was when you're in your podcast I feel that you're actually asking me questions and trying to tie things together in a way that I
Hmm.
appreciate. And I was just kind of missing you just a little bit. And I don't
Yeah.
miss you right now. I'm like, oh, there he is. Hey, what's up? Like hearing more about
Yeah.
actually you. That's my own
What it
selfish
do?
desire. Yeah, what it do?
What it do? What it do? No, I really appreciate that. And I think it definitely brings in a nice element of rawness into this. And that's kind of what I've wanted this space to be with the Live Thrivingly project. And I think part of it too is a little bit, there's been times in my life in the past 5 years of really kind of forming the Live Thrivingly project and the podcast and stuff where I was doing a lot more week to week, month to month kind of travel and retreat spaces and stuff. And it definitely does become a little bit more accessible in those times. And I've been kind of more just in the day to day chop wood, carry water with some work stuff. And it is always a reminder to like, make sure I'm tapping into those spaces and cultivating these conversations with other people and having them with myself too. Because it does mean so much to how I show up in my career as well.
For sure. Yeah. I think one of the hardest things I had to learn for a long time, I stuck to being happy. And the reason that comes up for me now is that it was really easy to just kind of do the part of being present and do the part of being caring and doing the part of getting things done well in a way that I wasn't really there because I was scared of actually feeling the parts that didn't feel good. And that unfortunately, you gotta have to feel that part to feel the good part too.
Absolutely. My therapist would say, she's like, you got to just be able to sit in those bad feelings, Jackson. You can't run from them all the time. It's, man, it's sticky to want to sit with them. And that's still, something that I'm working to do better with. And she's like, don't go creating something and getting yourself out of the feeling. Just sit with it. Like,
That's a good therapist knows me.
yeah. And it's like, she's like, you're going to probably, which I do feel like writing helps me process a lot, right? But like maybe just writing for the practice of writing and not like it's something I'm going to create to share. Um,
Mm,
just letting it
yeah,
kind of be in the moment and with where I am and who I am in my authentic version as of today.
yeah. I think for me, a lot of time, what made it hard for me to sit with my feelings, for the sit with the bad so that I could even feel the good, was I was really bad about catastrophizing and ruminating. Like I just made it worse and worse in my own head, or I would sit and just kind of think about it. Like, I wasn't actually sitting with the feelings. I was sitting with the story of my feelings. And I think there's a big difference there that I had to learn, that sitting with the feeling is actually paying attention to how my body feels and paying attention to what's going on in my like visceral somatic self versus getting caught up in like, oh, I'm scared I have cancer, or I really wish that my boss would have treated me differently in that moment, or I don't like that that situation didn't turn out the way I wanted or whatever. Let me give a more authentic one because now I'm giving stories. What was something that actually I stuck at? Yeah, that's one. Um, I can get frustrated at watching my partner's kids fight. The part of me that wants to be like the dictator that my parents were to me is so loud that I just want to be like, stop fighting and go over. Like I can see the part of me that wants to like control the situation with even force if necessary. Like watching that part and taking the breath and realizing that like I don't feel in control and they feel like they're doing things that if they continue this way forever, it's dangerous. And that I have to really sit and feel the discomfort so that when I am approaching them, I can bring them care or support or guidance and help them navigate that little boys are supposed to fight. And that I have like a practical, grounded way of being like, how do I have spaciousness for them to be in a part of their process of development and also guidance from an adult that cares, and I can't do that if I don't sit with the part of me that wants to choke the shit out of them. And so that's what I mean by like, I have to get out of the story about them being bad kids or, oh my God, they're going to turn into this as an adult or, you know, even catch the part of me that's thinking about how my parents treated me and pause that, sit with the suck, take a breath. Okay. Now that I've done that, what do I actually want to do now that I don't feel like I have to react into doing something? It's a more like sincere example of something that I go through still in my present life and even doing this work for coming
Yeah.
up on 20 years, you know?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us and, just kind of illuminating again your humanity, your humanness, like we all have it, even, depending on where we're at in our careers and what the other people we lead and stuff, we're still working through our own stuff. And it's amazing that, you're able to have the skills and the tool belt that you built up over time to kind of recognize and notice. And, a lot of what you're able to help pass along to other people is kind of how to be able to tap into those same things.
Well, I think it's really important not to become the guru who didn't integrate your own teachings.
Hmm.
This is what you do, and they almost come across as holier than thou, but they're the ones that like all the scandals end up happening around and things of that
Hmm.
nature. Like you get caught up in the clout in a way that you stop practicing what you would have somebody else do. I really aim to keep doing it myself because it's really easy to tell the positive thing to do, like, yeah, just do this. I think what's actually really helpful is to point out, like, here's the part that I struggled in doing that. Here's the part where I saw that it's easy to fall into when you try that. Here's what was in the way of me actually accomplishing that. And here's how I managed that part. Because that's where I think it really gets down to it. It's the not pointing out what would create success, but what support looks like in helping the parts that get in the way of that success. Because it's not just the positive things that we're aiming for in life. It's having somebody having the ability to see the things that like are making it harder still. Like when somebody first starts working with me, I don't tell them that like life's gonna get better. We're in the
Yeah.
season of not making things get worse,
Hmm.
you know?
And that's it. I kind of hear with that one point you shared about not like things might not get better, but you said it right before it was, and I feel like what was coming up for me was, yeah, sometimes even, yeah, what I explore with people on this podcast and what I explore with other friends of mine occasionally is just uh, feeling like, we're really having bigger, like we're having more critical conversations, if we want to call it that, right? Rather than just really always touching on the positives and stuff and just like what's going good in your life, etc. And I started leading a men's group recently with some friends of mine, and it's been going great. But still, it's kind of breaking those barriers down. It's I want to celebrate everybody's successes and wins, but especially teaching men how to open up around like what's sticky right now, what's vulnerable, because so much growth can come when we share that and realize that there's three guys in the group right now that are feeling the same thing. Maybe they have this going on with their partner. They're worried about finances and this and that. And if we can't ever have those conversations and be able to kind of sit in more uncomfortable emotions with one another, I feel like we're limiting our growth.
Yeah. And it's not just limiting our growth. I think that that type of interactions what helps us actually heal, because it's not just moving forward, it's dealing with what came behind us, like what we've gone through now. I
Yeah,
wish the thing that somebody would have taught me was that the first time you feel safe in your life, it's everything you've survived comes up to be felt.
yeah, that's not easy.
No. Yeah. Like you think you're going to feel better when you make it to the good place. And then now you have to deal with all the things you had to put away to get here.
And
Yeah.
it's really interesting because I think almost everyone agree they deeply desire that place of safety, but many people, and myself included, in different ways, we make it to where we have other things to kind of protect us from reaching that safety point for fear of, okay, what might come up when I am ready to sit with that unconscious.
And that's when it becomes nothing's enough. And that you'll keep striving, because if I'm not careful or anybody else isn't careful, if we're not careful, we'll keep pushing for a perfect safety that'll never exist.
Beautiful. So let's kind of shift gears here, Zach, into the last little question that I love to ask all my guests, part of the Live Thrivingly project, an archive of answers from people around the world. When you hear the phrase live thrivingly, how do you interpret it? And, what does it mean to you?
Mm. Hmm. I'm going to think for a second. It's silly, but I love it. It's kind of a somatic feeling. It's not very cognitive. It's a very feeling kind of thing, visceral. The response that when I try on live thrivingly,
Mm.
it's just like, hey, that's
Hey,
literally the answer. Like,
yeah,
hey, like
hey,
I'm dancing in the kitchen with a
yeah,
friend,
yeah.
making a good meal. I don't know. It kind of like I'm having mental images, like smiling while doing labor, or um. Let me move into like actual words, because it's bringing up a lot of imagery and a lot of feeling.
Hmm.
Trying on living, thriving. Like, let me see what the through line is. So the through line for me is that here it is. Yeah, it feels like a combination of both learning how to do and be, to do something that matters and be someone that I love being, kind of mixed together. Where like the left foot, right foot lets me go the direction I want, of doing the work, of being myself and doing the healing, but also doing the work of doing the things outside of my internal world, and learning to kind of shift back and forth in a way that um, the weight of being alive doesn't feel too terribly heavy anymore.
Beautiful answer. And I love the imagery of that, and that's come up for you. And that's a thing I do extend. I don't know if I position the question to, directly get that from you, but people like share photos and art, and I love those moments you shared because I see them and I feel them for myself too. Like there's just something about, fresh sheets on the bed and,
Yeah.
bread baking in the oven, us sitting at P. Terry's in lawn chairs just eating in this nice evening.
Yeah. 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 doing things that I really am grateful to be doing and being someone I love during and after. There's kind of what comes up for me when I try that on.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today, Zach. If someone enjoyed this podcast, enjoyed listening to you and what you shared, how might they get in touch with you?
So the main thing that I have that people can reach out to me through is I normally give people my phone number or my email, and I feel more comfortable giving my email in this particular format, um, which is the only way that you can really contact me. Are those two ways: is my email or my phone number, and my email is ZC Robison, and that's going to be Robison. It's not Robinson, but Robison at Gmail. And so ZC Robison at Gmail. And just hit me up. And what I normally do from there, like I said, I do a vibe check. So if somebody wanted to talk with me in work, the way that I do is like they would send me their email, send me like a spiel if they'd want to talk. We would have a 30-minute phone consultation. And then from there, we would just see what feels good and if that's what we wanted to do. I just like to keep it simple if I can. An email works normally for me. And then I would move into phone from there.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Live Thrivingly podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Hall, and I hope you found inspiration and valuable insights to help you thrive in both your personal and professional life. Remember, the journey to living thrivingly is one step at a time, and we're here to walk that path with you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with someone who could benefit from these conversations. For more resources and updates, be sure to visit my website at livethrivingly.com or visit my social media page at Instagram at livethrivingly. And as always, continue to live thrivingly because you deserve to live a life full of purpose, vitality, and joy. Until next time, take care and keep thriving.